So according to Wayne, Thomas Nelson is the person I'm searching for. Professor Connery had been waiting for a letter from Wayne. He was searching for a certain man, and upon getting the information he needed from Wayne, he set out to Texas. Excuse me, mister, would you be able to tell me where Thomas Nelson lives? Thomas Nelson, that cranky old man, are you here from the old age home to take him? He's down by the lake in that broken trailer of his. You'll know it when you see him, that stinking old man. An old man leaning on his cane opened the door. He had a scowl on his face at the first sight of a new visitor. Who are you? I didn't invite anyone. Thomas Nelson? The man held his chest, coughing, choking over his words. Professor Connery went to hold him. Are you okay? I don't need any help. What are you here for? I only wish to speak with you. I don't have the time to talk to you fancy folk wearing suits and all. Get out of here, he said, shutting his trailer door. Professor Connery tried knocking the door once more and calling the old man, but it was of no use. He finally walked out to a nearby bench, wondering how he was going to get this man to talk, when suddenly a young woman approached him.
Well, well, butter my cheeks and call me a biscuit. Isn't it a wonder? What brings a handsome fellow like you to a place like this?
Excuse me?
What, you've never spoken to a country gal like me, have you?
No, it's not like that. I've traveled all over the States.
My name is Barbara. They call me Barbie around here. You?
Connery. I was here to meet Thomas Nelson, but I can see he's not used to having visitors, and neither does anyone want to visit him. What's his story?
I've been living here for a couple of years now, and boy, let me tell you, old man Tom is one nutcase. He's lost his job, he ain't got no money. I heard his wife kicked him out of his own house. You see that broken leg he has? That's 'cause his son don't care to raise his hands on him, and he ain't got any other family either. He's been living all alone since. He don't like speaking to nobody, don't like taking help from nobody. I hear him coughing all day. Old man's health is biting him in the A, but he don't even go to the doctor. Horrible life if you ask me. But what you gotta do with him?
I've come to take him from here, perhaps to a place where he can finally solve his problems.
Oh, bless your heart. It's hard to find do-gooders these days. But let me warn you, Tom ain't someone to listen. He's more stubborn than a mule.
Over the next few days, Professor Connery returned to meet Thomas Nelson, but he refused to speak to him every time, often quite rudely. I told you to get out of here. I have nothing to do with you. Don't you have anything to do? 'Cause I don't have time to talk to nobody. What do you want from me? Why are you following me around? Well, Mr. Nelson, I don't want anything from you, but perhaps you can help someone both you and I know. Professor Connery took out a picture of a young woman and showed Thomas. Thomas snickered without even taking a good look. I don't know her, and I ain't got no time to help nobody. Then perhaps Paul Watson would be able to help. The look on Thomas's face suddenly darkened. He looked anxious. How did you know that name? How did you find me? Professor Connery folded his arms and looked at Thomas. I have my ways. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Who are you? Who am I is not what's important at the moment, but who you are and what you're trying to hide is. Nonsense. You don't know anything about me. Secrets don't last in this world, Paul Watson. Your life has been nothing but miserable, and perhaps it's simply because what goes around comes around. But there is a way you can better your life, by doing good, by assisting someone who needs your help. What do you want me to do? Come with me. There's someone you must meet at the Winchester Mental Asylum. The Winchester Mental Asylum was renowned through the States for its treatment for unusual patients. There was a division in which patients with strange, unexplainable, and unfortunately incurable conditions were admitted. Professor Connery, this could be very dangerous. No one is allowed to enter her cell without special precautions, especially men. Don't worry, Dr. Emma. Everything will be fine. One of the doctors who knew Professor Connery secretly unlocked the room of a young woman named Karen Stanley and allowed the men inside. Karen was sitting to the corner of the room. Her hands and feet were chained. She was mumbling something under her breath. "How do you expect me to help this insane girl?" Paul scowled in dismay. Upon hearing his voice, Karen turned around. She suddenly became furious. With one pull, she twisted the chains off her hands and feet. Professor Connery let out a deep breath. "It's only you who can."
You filthy, wicked beast, have you come to suffer to your end?
Paul was shocked by the tone of her voice. He was horrified to see the rage in this girl's eyes. As soon as she lunged forward to attack him, Paul turned towards the door. Professor Connery stood in the way. "Get out of the way! This girl is mad!" "Stop, Paul. Look at her. Look into her eyes. Perhaps you will recognize someone you knew as Penelope Reed." It was many years ago in 1969 in the small town of Winchester that a beautiful girl named Penelope Reed fell in love with a man named Paul Watson. They first met when Paul came to Penelope's father's auto shop to get his car fixed. Penelope used to be her father's helper. She managed the car wash that was joined to the auto shop. And it was one day that the two met eyes. Penelope was only 18 at the time, and Paul was graduating college. But something between the two clicked, and turned out that Paul's car started to get dirty one way or the other, and he started making trips to the auto shop almost 3 or 4 times a week. This small love affair continued on to small tips he would give Penelope in which he would sneak in his love letters. And Penelope would sneak in hers through her long receipts from the long car washes every time. The relationship progressed and the two started meeting in privacy by the Twin Creeks, where lovers often went to sit by the waters and spend time together. Things started to get serious between them, and the two couldn't stay away from each other. It was one cool spring night. Penelope and Paul were near the creeks when things got a bit intimate between them. Paul convinced her that everything would be fine, and Penelope carelessly agreed. They both went into the woods where there was an inn. However, it was closed. No one was around, and no one would know if they just broke in for an hour or so. Penelope had never been with Paul in so much privacy. They had been alone before, but not in the middle of the woods, where no one was around to even hear them. Her parents didn't know where she was or who she was with. Penelope started to have second thoughts, and Paul, becoming more aggressive by the minute, started frightening her into thinking if she had taken the wrong decision. "Paul, I'm not ready for this yet." "What do you mean you're not ready for this yet? Do you even know how long I've waited? You can't do this to me." Paul became enraged upon Penelope's sudden refusal. He paid no heed to her screams or her cries, and he did as he pleased. Penelope wept, cowering in the corner of the room. She threatened to expose Paul's filthy, wicked nature to everyone. She would hand him over to the police for taking advantage of her innocence. The two got into a fierce argument. Paul was only 25. He had his whole life ahead of him. He wasn't going to ruin it because of this girl he was having a silly fling with. He tried to subdue Penelope with his words, but words weren't enough. He had to take action, and so he took her life. Anxiously, he left Penelope in that state and fled from Tennessee. When the inn reopened, workers were horrified to find the remains of a woman in a horrible condition. They informed the police, who identified who it was and what might have happened, but they were unable to catch the perpetrator. Paul Watson thought he had gotten away with it. He changed his name and traveled from place to place searching for a new home. But little did he know that things weren't so easy in this world. He had nothing but suffering in his life. Penelope was given a burial, but her soul restlessly remained where she was murdered. She awaited to take vengeance. She hated Paul. She hated men. The inn ran out of business when news of Penelope Reed's demise got out. It was abandoned and no one ever dared to go there. Until many, many years later, a young couple named Jason Miller and his girlfriend Karen Stanley decided that's where they would spend their prom night. They had a wonderful time together. Jason was a good boyfriend. He not only loved but cared for Karen. But he had the ill fate of encountering not Karen, but Penelope Reed, who had possessed her. Penelope used Karen as her vessel, taking the lives of many men unjustly for her vengeance until she was caught in the act. However, through it all, it was Karen who was suffering. Doctors believed Karen had gone insane. She was uncontrollable. She was taken to a mental asylum where doctors tried to treat her, but nothing seemed to be working. It was when an article about Karen Stanley's strange condition was published that Professor Connery happened to read it and became quite curious. He contacted the asylum, and after much request he was allowed to see Karen Stanley. And though her first instinct was to attack him, Professor Connery was quick to sense it wasn't her, but the spirit that possessed her. "Who are you, and what do you want from this girl?" "Penelope Reed, and I won't rest until I get my vengeance for what that wicked beast did to me." "Who did this to you?" Professor Connery came to know her story and the man who was behind it all. Dr. Emma, the woman in charge of Karen Stanley, was amazed how Professor Connery was able to speak to her and keep her in control. She agreed to Professor Connery's plans and was ready to assist him. It was from then that Professor Connery began to hunt down the real perpetrator. However, that's when he found out that the young man named Paul Watson had suddenly gone missing after the incident in 1969. With some of his own research and help from one of his companions, Wayne Harris, Professor Connery found out Paul Watson was living undercover as Thomas Nelson in Texas. He lived a miserable life all alone. His family despised him and left him to suffer. He had no care, deteriorating health, though at first it seemed he deserved mercy. But what mercy could there be for a man who could do such an evil thing and cover it up as if nothing had happened? Professor Connery managed to bring Paul to the mental asylum where Penelope could confront her murderer. Karen grabbed hold of Paul and swung him across the room from his wheelchair.
All these years you thought you would get away after what you did to me? You promised me you would take care of me, and you only took advantage of me, and you left me there that night in a cabin to rot.
Seeing the commotion, Dr. Emma hurried to the door, but Professor Connery ushered her to stay outside. He called out to Karen, "Penelope Reed, this is the man that has wronged you. He is the culprit, not this innocent girl. Release her from this misery."
Today you will feel what I felt that night.
"Penelope, forgive me, I...
It's too late for forgiveness, Paul. Now you will suffer."
By the time the authorities became aware of what had happened in Karen Stanley's cell, Paul Watson lay on the ground. His neck cracked, his legs twisted over his head, and Karen lay unconscious on the floor. "We must get her help immediately." Karen was taken to the hospital, while the remains of what was assumed to be Thomas Nelson was taken to the forensic laboratory. Police were shocked to discover blood samples taken in 1969 from a crime scene matched with the current DNA of Paul Watson. After 51 years, the cold case of Penelope Reed was reopened. The murderer had been found. "Dr. Emma, how is she now?" Suddenly, Professor Connery heard a familiar voice. "Professor! Wayne, you're here. I see the strange case of Karen Stanley has come to an end. But Professor, when you brought this old man here, did you know the spirit within this girl would take his life? Did you know he was in danger?" Wayne, this young woman Penelope Reed had been suffering for so many years. And Paul Watson, had he really gotten away with it all? He too suffered through a horrible, miserable life. It was time both of them relieved themselves. And how can a wrongdoer relieve his soul without retribution? Now the both of them can finally rest in peace. And so can this innocent young girl, Karen, be relieved of the burden she was carrying.
Indeed, Professor Connery, this is truly a miracle. Karen Stanley was one of the patients whom we almost lost hope for. We never thought she would return to her normal self. Her sudden recovery is absolutely astonishing. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Wayne. This wouldn't have been possible without people like you. No, Professor Connery. The credit goes to you.
Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.